Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Speaking Out, Exposing Corruption and Incompetence. Welcome, and a pleasant morning to all the viewers. Let me start by giving thanks to the Almighty for allowing me the opportunity to see another day and to be here to discuss, to reveal certain things with you. So, thanks for life spared. Thanks for being here to view another program of Speaking Out, exposing corruption and incompetence. This is our eighth episode, and so far, from all indication, the program is gaining in popularity. More and more people are reaching out and making suggestions. Some people are asking for more episodes. Some people are suggesting that maybe we do it twice a week. Some people want rebroadcast. So we're going to consider all of that and decide on the way forward. So what I want to take this opportunity to invite you to share the link, share the live stream, so that more persons can see what is going on. More persons can become aware of what we are revealing, what we are speaking out. Also, it is broadcast live. This program is broadcast live on YouTube. So those of you who know people who do not have a Facebook account, you can encourage them to go to YouTube and the same name, Speaking Out, Exposing Corruption and Incompetence, that will take you to the channel. And if perchance you should miss the live broadcast, you can also go to the very page on Facebook or to the page on YouTube and get the broadcast there. And all the episodes are there because once the live broadcast has been completed, we post the live recording on YouTube so that you can view in your own time. You can see it again and again as often as you like. And once you get to YouTube, we encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you will get the notification when the program starts. Now, I'm glad for the opportunity to once again be able to speak to you on this program. You know, in the past weeks, I've been urging you to follow the COVID-19 protocols. And I think I'm happy to say that based on what I've seen, the numbers are declining. That is not an indication to me for you to become complacent. I want to again urge and encourage all of us to continue to follow the protocol so that we are not infected or affected by this deadly virus. So it's nice to see the numbers of new infections and the number of persons hospitalized. Those numbers are falling, and let us do all we can do to make sure that it continues to fall. You know, last week I did promise that given the discussion we had about training in the police force, you recall I had as my guest retired Assistant Commissioner Mr. Clinton Conway, who I said is perhaps the most qualified person in Guyana to deal with police training. He was there as a guest last week, and by popular demand, he's here with me again this week. I mean, I can already see that he's in the studio. So once I have finished with this usual introduction, I'll bring on Mr. Conway for him to discuss training in the police force with us. Now, I want to, before I bring in Mr. Conway, I want to announce, sadly, the passing of three former police ranks, 7050 Steele. I can't remember Mr. Steele, but the word is that Mr. Steele was a detective in the Guyana Police Force. He passed recently. Then we have Detective Sergeant 7797 Carl Wilson. He too passed recently. I knew Carl very well. Used to be at CID headquarters, F Division, and I got to know him even better in 1989 because he was part of the United Nations peacekeeping contingent in Namibia. I was the leader of that contingent. And Jaro, as he was popularly known, was a part of that contingent. Well, Jaro recently passed. And then word out also is that retired woman Sergeant Lynette Steele, W361. I knew Lynette very well because we were on the same course. We joined the force on the same day, March 1974. She was given regulation number W361. As a matter of fact, we were in the same classroom during our training. And then when we were transferred, I think she spent a considerable amount of her time at force control. So those 3 persons passed recently. I want to take this opportunity to express condolences to their friends and families and the surviving persons, the surviving relations. And may their souls rest in peace. Now, the next issue that I want to touch on briefly is this question that has been swirling around following the high-speed chase and the death of 2 persons in this accident at Michael sometime last week. There have been lots and lots of comments. People have been saying that the driver of the vehicle, once he was stopped by the police in order to pull over, he should have done so. I fully agree with that. Once the police stopped him, because the law is clear, policeman in uniform comes out and he stops you, providing he has reasonable grounds, you stop. You stop. And you say that if you do nothing, you should fear nothing, you stop. But the issue here is that once the driver did not stop, then it's the action of the police. What action the police took? I think the police decided to send a message and to chase after the driver. That led to a crash, the death of the driver and his companion, 16-year-old companion in the vehicle, injuries to the policeman. Now let me make it quite clear. Let me make it quite clear. The fact that the chase, for those who want to justify the chase, the fact that the chase led to the death of 2 persons, serious injuries to others, including policemen, and extensive damage to vehicles, tells you that something is wrong with the course of action taken. And therefore, you have to go back to standing orders. What does the standing order say in relation to high-speed chase? I recall not so long ago, the police I command issued a statement. I don't know if it was codified in a standing order, but they issued a statement saying that police should not engage in high-speed chase. And we have had issues in recent times. If you recall, some time ago on the Monterey Post Public Road, the motorcyclist died because he was chased by the police vehicle, and some alleged that the police vehicle might have clipped the motorcycle, sending him to the back of a parked truck, and he died. Then we had this incident here now where they chased after this car and the accident, multi-vehicle accident occurred. So something must be wrong with the action taken. And I'm saying this, that if there is no standing order, because I don't think there's any written standing order dealing with this matter. If there's no written standing order, then it is time for the police I command to issue clear guidance and instructions on how to respond to matters of that nature. Because clearly the response in this incident, in this instance, was not the correct response. And say whatever you want to say. The fact that 2 people died and policemen are injured and all the damage, it's an indication that the action taken could not have been the correct action. So I want to urge the authorities and I want to urge them to make sure that these things are properly codified. And having done that, you have to make sure that it is communicated to all persons concerned and it is followed by all persons concerned. And that is where discipline comes in. So because what happens when a person fails to comply with the instructions, you have to have systems in place to make that person accountable. So I thought I'll mention that because of the many, many comments that have been made. And as I've said, people started by saying, well, yes, the person should have, police stop you, you should stop. I totally and fully agree that the police stop you, you should stop. But my contention is if the person fails to stop, then you have to have a proper professional response to dealing with a matter like this. Bear in mind, because when that chase would have been initiated, there wasn't any evidence that any serious crime was committed. The person fled. The person could have fled for many reasons. I did say it could have been that he did not have a driver's license. The license could have expired. In this case, he had a 16-year-old with him. You understand the car might have been stolen. Whatever the circumstances were, whatever they were. The man might have panicked. It is the response. The police are the ones who have to rise above and make sure you respond in a professional manner. And I'm saying that this response was not the best, and that led to the death of these persons and the injury to the policemen themselves. I'm sure in reflection, you'll realize that they are lucky to be alive. They are lucky to be alive, and they have to, the administration, the force must ensure that these things are properly dealt with. So moving on, as I said before, Mr. Conway's here last week, his interaction was a bit truncated because he had some technical issues. As I said, he's in the studio already, so no technical issues this time around. So I want to now invite into the studio, invite into the program properly, retired Assistant Commissioner Clinton Conway. Mr. Conway, welcome. Good morning. I think you might check your mic. Your mic might be mute.
Yes.
Yes, good. I can hear you now. Good morning.
Good morning, Paul. Morning to our listeners, our viewers. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for again inviting me on your exciting program. And I'm not surprised because we are all, as I would say, co-accused, no?
Yes, we are indeed. We are indeed.
Together. I wish to join you in expressing deepest sympathy to the former policeman who passed, and woman who passed away recently, and my condolence to their family, their friends, and relatives. In terms of training, I want to make this point very clear. And I believe that training is what I would say the most important part of policing. It is the main route of development in the Ghana Police Force. Other departments and branches, even though they are important, they're like the branches of the tree. You cut the main root and the tree will die. You cut some of the branches and the tree will also survive. So our most precious resource is our human resource, not the fancy vehicles and expensive vehicles that we use to do chase down persons and then end up in deadly consequences, or the weapons that we would use to unlawfully kill people, or the weapons that they want to purchase, which is in the budget, to use taser, to use 10 gun, to use pepper spray, to use other chemicals to use against protesters. So training is critical. Training is about knowledge. Training is about skill. Training is about attitude. Training is about behavior. And the behavior of police, from the constable right up to the commissioner, is very critical. And there's where training comes into play.
Yeah, but see, first, thanking you. Let me thank you for accepting the invitation once again to be on the program. Well, you mentioned I agree with you fully that training is perhaps the most critical component of the organization. You have to train because whether it's recruit training, where a person comes in off the road raw and they know nothing about policing, you have to train them along a certain way. And even the same issue that you mentioned about the acquisition of vehicles, the acquisition of munitions, the acquisition of chemical agents, even when you acquire those things, training is still very, very necessary, because if you don't train properly, then as in the case as we have seen this accident, then the incorrect action is taken. These things are misused and you run into the problem. So yes, training is the key to all of this. Training and more training and more training. And tell me something about the programs that you are aware of as the person there. I know when you left, there were lots of programs that you left to be continued. What is going on with those programs?
Several years ago, the government got a loan from the IDB to do what they call a citizens security program. And it had several components. And training was one of the components. You had strategic management, which would have been from 2011 to 2015. Well, let's stop, start, stop, start. I don't know if they've achieved any milestone. And they had what they call ICIS. So we had ISIS in Guyana, Integrated Crime Information System, where reports on crime were submitted to a central body. In that case, it was the Ministry of Affairs, and they had some analysts there who were doing the analytical work. And on a monthly basis, they were putting out those reports to the police so that they can take the necessary action to deal with crime. It was designed really to have a real life situation, but I don't know what's happening with them. But the training component, where we had we call it tech program, the emergence group from the United States of America came to Guyana. And together with me, we developed a 1-year comprehensive training program for the Guyana Police Force. And let me give you an idea of some of the topics, some of the subjects that we did. We did 29, where things like crisis management, effective investigation, effectively dealing with people, conflict resolution, self-esteem, interviewing techniques, interviewing witnesses, interviewing suspects, interrogation, effectively dealing with people, policing multicultural and diverse society, advanced facilitation course, case management, drug investigation, drug identification, and a whole series, 29. And the thing is that at the end of that, during that training program, we had what we call a train the trainers component, where we train persons to teach those subject area. We had electronic copy and hard copies available for those 29 programs. When I left all there in the office, plus I left the electronic copies. The program was evaluated as we started it, and somewhere 3/4 in the program, a woman who was in charge of the Caribbean and Latin America for the bank, dealing with the same kind of program, came and evaluated us. She gave us a successful review, and at the end of the program, the bank sent Dr. Mark Cotton, who was at the time at the University of West Indies, to do an evaluation, and he was high in his praise for the 1-year comprehensive training program. The intention was that at the end of the program that we replicate those training programs, that there should have been sustainability. When they left, I continued it, and I subsequently left. Paul Williams came on board. He did some training, but they give him, as I always say, basket to fetch water. And when Paul Williams left, everything just went on the back burner, or not even the back burner. They turned off the stove. None of those programs, the government spent a tremendous lot of money, millions and millions and millions of dollars for us to replicate those training programs. There are some very successful candidates on the program. People like Ingrid Wiltshire, she has left the job. But we have people like Keaton King, I think he's in Division Force 4B. Elton Davison is in Borbis. And those persons were identified to help continue the training. There were several others. So the government has not gotten its money's worth for the training program. Millions and millions of dollars has gone to waste. And those training programs, the last time I checked, I see termite was eating some of them, as the case may be. Those are critical programs for the Guyana Police Force to deal with behavior, how police must operate in different situations. Crisis management, if they have training, I doubt whether they rather high speed kind of thing that end up in deadly consequences.
Yeah, but well, I'm glad that you're informing us of that, because I said that you're the expert in this area. Some of these things I'm not even aware of. When you spoke about the program, this to monitor crime, and the program that was coordinated in the Ministry of Home Affairs, I can relate to that. That program started around 2005. I was, as you know, at the time, the person who identified to lead the reform. And I recall vividly the IDB sending someone from Colombia. Can't remember, a doctor from Colombia came, and we did what they referred to as the geo mapping of crime. In that you had a situation where every crime, every serious crime that was committed was going to be mapped, and therefore that would have been able to inform your deployment. That would have been able to inform your response. How you're going to use your resources. So I know that you talk about it. I remember that. But as you're saying, those things we have all fallen by the wayside, even though so much money would have been expended to deal with that. Now, you also made a very interesting point about the persons who were identified and trained, and you called a few names, and I think some of those people are still around, are they not?
Yes, many of them are wrong. As I mentioned, King is in Division 4B, and Elton Davidson is in charge of the police college at Felix Housing Police College at Adventure. And there are many others. I think the present finance officer did many of those training programs also. There are people there who are wrong. The records are there, and they need to utilize them.
So people were identified, people were trained, but they're not used in the area for which they were taught to be capable and competent. And in the meanwhile, I think it is fair to say that the persons who are there now in the training college are not as competent or are not prepared. Let me be fair to them. Perhaps they were not properly prepared for the positions that they find themselves in. What is your take on that?
Well, I agree with you. I had a check recently, and many of them there did not have the benefit of what we call a, a, a trainer's course, an instructor's course. They, in some instances, it appears as though the college is a dumping ground. Somebody commits themselves and they ended up at the college. I recall sometime late last year, um, Superintendent Audrey Small, she was a traffic officer at A Division, and there was some issue with her and Brutus. And they transferred her to the training school 5 days before she go on pre-retirement leave. 5 days before she go on pre-retirement. And as you mentioned in one of the program, she went in the wicket, she reported sick, got 5 days sick leave, and thing. So if the best for me, the best must be at the college, and you must treat them as the best in terms of promotions and other areas. That those people at the college must be trained, and it's basically what we call chalk and talk.
Yeah, in this modern age, you still get to that stage, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you made an interesting point. So we have people at the college who are supposed to be facilitators or instructors. I remember in our days, you had some very, very good, excellent instructors in the various police subjects. My class instructor was Yankee Williams, 6748 Yankee Williams, outstanding policeman. My understanding is that one of the issues that you have there is that some people might be what we call good policemen. Some of the instructors might be good policemen. But as you have said, that the ability to impart, because you can be a very good policeman, when you're sent to the training school, is not only about being a good policeman, but it's being able to impart your knowledge into the recruits, to the trainees. What is your take on that?
I agree with that. Apart from in imparting your knowledge, Paul, there must be a relationship between the instructor and the trainees.
Well, let me be rude and interrupt, because when you talk about relationship, I understand that in recent time there were relationships, but I'm sure that's not the type of relationship you're talking about, because if you remember, Senior Superintendent Karim Bash, the other Soku, is accused of at least seeking trainees to have to have relationship with, unprofessional relationship. But I'm sure that that is not what you were speaking of. So please clarify for our viewers.
Thank you. I'm quite aware of the allegations, the two set of allegations, my word, made against Senior Superintendent Karim Bash. But I'm talking about out of classroom relationship where the instructor has got to be a role model. He's got to be a facilitator. He's got to be a mentor, and he's got to be able to guide those trainees. And they're both male and female. And when you look at the college is dominated by male instructors. I did a research a couple of years ago whilst I was there, and I discovered that sometime for the very first time, one of the recruits had a male teacher was when he went to the college. It's miss and miss and miss and miss while he's going to school. And when I look at the last graduation for the teachers training college, I discovered that, or it was said that 87% of those persons graduated were females. So there got to be some psychological difference, because the first time you go in the classroom when you reach a male instructor, and if you're dealing with female and male. So the instructor has got to be like a father figure, be able to guide them, a mentor, a role model, and things that to make the training easier. And
Well, yeah, go ahead.
training is an individual thing, Paul. You can't make me learn. They say you can carry the horse to the fountain, but you can't make it drink. But there's another thought saying that, hey, you have got to create the environment for the horse to become thirsty and want to drink. And that is the attitude that the instructors has got to portray there to make the trainees want to learn.
Yeah, but I mean, good point. I remember as part of the reform that we were dealing with, one of the questions that came up and was asked frequently, and we were investigating and we were doing the research, is whether during the training there is need for this militaristic um, arrangement. You know, people are there, you want going to training school, you drill, and then you have to be in there all the time until perhaps at the end of the week, once or twice a month, you have a weekend pass. And people, it was questioned then, because I remember some of the consultant questioning whether it was cost effective to have those forces in there all the time, and given the psychological effects as well, because you know now the truth is that, especially with the recruitment of female, many of them are single parent, many of them have children, and to ask them to be away from the children for so long might really and truly affect the way they perform. What is your take on that?
I agree with you. And in my days, I did cut down a bit in terms of drill, but trainees are human beings. Some are mothers, fathers, single parent. And we have to look after their welfare. There's also saying that rules without relationship lead to rebellion, lead to chaos, lead to confusion. And we have to treat them like human beings. This big stick method can't work all the time. Yes, we need to maintain discipline, but yet at the same time, we need to look after their welfare. That's why I've been asking about for them to establish what you call a behavioral science unit at the police training college, so that persons would have access to behave, persons who are steep in dealing with behavior, because behavior is critical. I say from top to bottom. I think they started with a drop in the ocean. They employ somebody, a psychologist who's there. I don't sort in what kind of work they're doing there, but it's a step, but just a drop in the ocean, that we need to look at behavior, and we need to look at the trainees' welfare. Yes, you want to do drill all the time, but when they come out from training school, how often do they drill? Is it cost effective? Is it police getting benefits for this kind of thing? So I used to say, cut down on the drill. Yes, they must know to drill. Yes, they must have good deportment, as the case may be, but concentrate more on the policing, the work that they have to do when they go to the station.
Wonderful, wonderful. Concentrate on the work that they have to do when they go out of station. Talking about the relationship between the trainee and the instructor, I recall very well in our days, sometimes you go out into the field, you go to the station, and you encounter issues. You always could have gone back of course, those days you hadn't cell phone for you to call anyone. You could have gone back to your instructor for him to clarify certain issues. And yes, that relationship was in fact there. But you have spoken and we have emphasized on the perhaps what we call the basic training with the trainees. What about the other training? We talk about training at the other levels, station sergeant, induction for detective, a prosecutor's course, junior senior officers course, and all the other courses that we know were so important for ensuring that the standards and that knowledge was passed on and that the standards were maintained. What about those courses?
Uh, Paul, let me start from the top. The last senior officers course I had, I conducted it, and that's over 10 years ago. I can't remember when last year we called it a junior officer course, and that is a course that prepare the persons to move on to high heights and to prepare them to go to the University of Guyana. Because on that program, the first month is they will be attached to the University of, of Guyana, where they do leadership and management and where they see themselves as university students. And many persons from that junior officer course eventually found themselves at the university with degrees, with diplomas, and other certificates. We used to run other courses, supervisor's course, station sergeant course, as I mentioned, course for newly promoted persons, right along the line. For the matter, I had a 32-page training policy and procedure. I think there should be a copy somewhere in the thing. I have my own copy, where we look at training and we look at in-service training in the various categories. Then we look at specialized training, where the place like the mountain branch, the marine section, the finance department, the CID, and all those areas would run their own training program. And also we look at external training at the Technical Institute and other areas. Paul, you have put up a paper in terms of study leave, where you are recommended that every year we should send a certain amount of officers to the University of Guyana for training. I read recently the president said that that training would be ongoing and would be free of cost. It's nothing new, but they must get what we call the rite of passage. You loaned me a book some time ago, Colin Powell, My American Journey. I gave you back. I didn't keep it like the one that I have right now. Where they call it the rites of passage. Before you reach a certain rank, you must go through a certain amount of training to qualify to perform at that rank. But those things aren't being done. I watched for last year, and he can submitted some training programs he called core programs that the trainees won't benefit. The Guyana Police Force won't benefit from them because those programs were not put together. Persons who put them together, they know have a hint in terms of what curriculum development is about. The objectives different from the contents, and the objectives are wrong. So if the objectives are wrong, the whole program is wrong. Waste of time, waste of money, waste of energy. Another thing, they don't do no kind of evaluation. I want to recommend to them Kirkpatrick's model of evaluation, and it sits on 4 legs. It talk about the reaction to the training, person reacted to training. It talk about learning, where you do tests, you do examinations to see if they learn. It talk about behavior, where you evaluate after the training has been completed. What about the performance of the people when they go there? Is there input? Is there a better quality service? And then you look at the results, the benefits to the organization, the benefits to the trainee, the benefits to their instructors. You do a cost analysis, benefit, and see whether the police getting money or the government getting money for what they have invested in training. If you don't evaluate, you don't know whether you're winning or losing the game. Not just bring in the classroom or training and finish and you left it at that. Evaluation, proper evaluation must be done. That is when you know whether you're winning or losing the game.
Well, wonderfully said, because I know, yes, first of all, You have to do the proper assessment to determine what type of training is needed. And then once those persons get the training, you must have some mechanism to determine whether the training that they underwent had any impact on performance or behavior. So if you are not doing that, basically you might just be wasting your time. But having said that, we must admit that when we look at some of the people who are put to be in charge of the training, you mentioned Clifton Aiken, then one would not be surprised that that is what you get, because I continue to say that from the staffing of the college, you can see what type of emphasis the organization places on training. And again, not only recruit training, because as we indicated before, at the college, they're not only involved in recruit training, but all the other in-service training programs. And I know the excuse over the past 2 years is that COVID has interfered with these face-to-face training programs. What do you have to say? What advice do you have to give on that?
Other areas, Paul, are continuing training and graduating persons. We had the Sale Potter College of Education graduated a record number of persons this year. The university graduate persons, you just name it, thing. But the police has become prosaic. They sit down there and they do nothing. They're not innovative. They're not imaginative. They're not thinking outside of the box. Oh, COVID, so we can't do anything. They have 3 computer centers, Paul, you're aware. One in Georgetown, the Zara in Georgetown, one in Borbis, one in Essequibo. They have persons who are doing a lot of computer training. So they need to digitize it, go digital, so that you can do the training in Georgetown, in Borbis. They have the computer centers right there, and nothing is being done because of COVID. So I'm saying they need to be innovative and they need to be futuristic. Don't sit down and say COVID and we can't do nothing. The force is short of a whole lot of manpower, and for the whole year, not a trainee was recruited, not a course pass out. They need to get going.
Well, having said that, you said that the short of manpower, one would not get the impression that I saw, because we see now, if you look around, police are now involved in cleanup campaign. Police are involved in building, paving walkway. So that really defies what you're saying, that they're short of manpower. Because if you're short of manpower, I can't see you being involved in those activities which are not core activities. Because I say this, let me say this, because I know these the people I refer to as amphibians are going to try to come at you and to try to say all kinds of things. I have nothing against policemen being involved in cleanup exercise. I have nothing against policemen being involved in beautification, and if it's paving, making pavement and all. But at the end of the day, you are going to be judged on how you deal with your core activities, your core responsibilities. And as far as I remember, your core responsibilities is the prevention and detection of crime and the successful prosecution of offenders. Those are the 3 that I will start. Prevention in the first instance, and then detect crime. And once you detect, we're talking about successful prosecution. So yes, you can go about doing all that you can do. Good PR, you're building roads, you're building walkway, and you're cleaning up campaign and all of that. But I will say that at the end of the day, you are going to be judged by how well you perform your core functions. What do you say about that?
I agree with you. And then sometimes, Paul, it depends on your deployment. I'm from Borbis and in regular contact with Borbis. Let me tell you what happened recently. We heard in the news that a youngster went into primary serving school with a cutlass and perhaps threatened somebody. I know what was the police response. Between 8 to 11, and 1 to 3 every school day. 2 neighborhood police, one in uniform and one in plainclothes, stationed at that school during school hours. That is a response. But they need to be futuristic. We know about the album. I heard presentations in the budget. There are going to be massive development in this country, one way or the other. And there's where the police has got to get on board. There's where the police has got to be prepared to deal with eventualities. And there's where training has got to come into play. That the police has got to be futuristic. And I'm very saddened that the strategic management program has gone nowhere. Nowhere at all. It has some pillars: operational priorities, people, performance, partnership, and infrastructure. And if they don't deal with those things, they're going to end up in some serious problem. The police will not be effective. They got to think along the future, think outside of the box. And as we mentioned most times, is how you deploy the people also. But even deploying people, they got to be trained. You can't send a neighborhood police to Bremen Urban School and they're not properly trained. You can't send them to in civilian clothes to do what? And those kind of things.
No clear objective. You see, no clear objective, and that is how you run into all kind of problems. They're put there, they're sent there. Perhaps nobody briefed them as to what they are going. Well, let's assume that the presence is required. You still have to brief them. Those people hardly have any proper training. Well, you made an important point.
And the school has a security guard.
The school has a security guard. So again, we're talking therefore about the proper use of resources. And I said you made a very important point about being futuristic. And some of the things that you spoke to are really new policies. And we know, according to the Police Act, Chapter 1601, the person responsible for policy is the subject minister. In this case, the Minister of Home Affairs. So one would expect that if you're going to talk about changing policies to make sure up to date with the emerging wealth of the country, oil and gas and all of that, then you have to have policy directions at the ministerial level. So how is that going? Do you know?
Paul, for us, we need to take another program to deal with policy and operational duties, because the police force is encountering a lot of political interference from top to bottom. The infrastructure of the force has shifted politically. And when the infrastructure shifts, Paul, everything will rumbling from the top down to the bottom. There is too much. And I'm going to, maybe in another program, I'm going to give some tremendous examples of political interference in the Guyana police force. The government is policy and the police is operation. And there was a minister, you know him well, a minister by the name of Gadraj, who was involved in a lot of operational issues in the Guyana police force. They had a disciplinary forces inquiry. He was called to give evidence. And he was asked questions about the illegal orders that he had given to Commissioner McDonald. And one in terms of upgrading a known criminal weapon from a 2.2 to a 9mm. And you know what that minister said? Commissioner McDonald should have been guided by the Constitution and his conscience. He threw McDonald under the bus. So those who are taking political directives, watch out. They're saying politics and get rules. I remember Forbes Burnham. I don't believe in everything that he said, but he made a point. I listened to him talking to his supporters. He said politics doesn't have rule. You play it as you see it. Today it right, tomorrow it is wrong. It is not for Sunday school teachers. And then he ended up and say, comrades, he who is politically appointed will be politically disappointed. So those are the top, the gang of five, and them who taking all those political decisions and taking action. Look out.
But see, you're talking about you're lecturing perhaps to the choir, because here you're telling me about Gadraj. I had my personal encounter with Gadraj in 2003. You recall?
Yeah,
When he instructed me, and I declined, according to the law, I declined. President Jacques Dio got involved, and they attempted to move me out of the force. I mean, that is there as part of the history of the Ghana Police Force. And then more recently, the trouble that you and I are in is as a result of political interference. The president wanted some people to be promoted, and when the commission on which we sat decided that we're going to follow the rules, then they came after us viciously. We are now co-accused in that conspiracy to commit fraud, and then they tagged on, as you would like to say, some other matters than me. So I have experienced political interference. I have experience, and I would want to dedicate an entire program, especially to those persons who are sitting there now and doing whatever the biddings are, because perhaps more than anyone else, I have the experience to speak on it. And I will tell people at some stage about my experience with way back in 1992 with election and all the elections that followed, and the consequences of my professional action. So yes, I am saying, and I have said before, that part of the big problem now in the police force, apart, we know what the training is, and we're talking about training, but it's the interference. Because as you're aware, in the last budget, the government allocated 120 million, it's $120 million for training in the police force. I mean, I wasn't sure whether that amount was an adequate amount, but I have done a little research since then. And I don't know if you recall, there was a program devised by one of these international agencies for senior officers. And that one program was, I think the cost was what, about 30 million Ghana dollars. So if we look at one program costing $30 million, then one would want to think that $120 million for the entire year is grossly inadequate. What do you say to that?
I agree. It is grossly inadequate. And I could tell you I'm in contact with some of those persons. You know, I maintain relationship. They do consult me.
You're referring to the consultants, the international consultants.
Yeah, we still in contact. And they were planning a training program for one program for senior officers. And the cost of that one program is 30 million Guyana dollars. So if they do this year, they're left with 90 million.
For all the other programs and all the other training.
Yeah, training is expensive. And we always say, if you feel training is not expensive, try ignorance.
Yeah, even field training is try ignorance. And some of the things that we're seeing, not only at the senior level, let's understand it clearly. And perhaps this is the sad part, but at all levels, you know, back in the day, and people always, some say, really should be talking about back in the day, but you have to use that as a reference point. Back in the day, you had allegations, you had of unprofessional conduct at certain junior levels, but you will find it very difficult to pinpoint senior people being involved in these unprofessional behavior. But now the unprofessional behavior is at all level, and I am on record as saying that part of the reason for that is because people are pitchforked into position for which they have not been properly prepared. People might have the potential. Now you have many persons who have graduated from the University of Guyana, first degree, diplomas, second degree. Good, congratulations to them. But then you have to have this specialized training to make sure that there is a relationship between your academic qualification and your policing management and training. You as a qualified trainer, I'm sure you can recognize that.
Yes, I agree with that. And we used to pursue training overseas, you know, in England, in Bramsell, and other areas of training in England where we do we send persons there on a regular basis. Even in Jamaica, where the British were pumping a whole lot of money to train Caribbean police officers, and we used to send people there. I can't remember when last some persons going to. Well, they have some right now in Russia that doing some long-term training. But apart from that, we need to ensure that we engage the British, we engage the American, we engage the Canadian, we engage the European Union, so that we can have specialized police training for our officers and ranks and file along the line. That training is important, and we need to have overseas training, regular overseas training. I understand recently that they got approval for a lot of members from the army to go and train in India. Why can't we have members of the Ghana Police Force going elsewhere to undergo specialized training in policing? I'm talking in policing and security issues. And
Well,
that's
yeah,
what we need to fight for
yeah,
that.
that is so important. Training is so important, but then that comes right back to policy, because I don't expect, you spoke about the British, you spoke about the Americans. One would not expect that the commissioner of police or the person who's carrying out the function of commissioner of police can relate directly to those foreign diplomats. That is where the policy comes in. Perhaps the Ministry of Home Affairs, perhaps the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to reach out. I recall not so long ago when the advisor was here, Mr. Russell Combe, in the interview. I was then the chairman of the Police Service Commission. And when he interviewed me, I emphasized the need for him to emphasize overseas training for selected officers. You select, and then there again, the program is so, the system, the police force is so politicized that one fears about the whole selection process. Who will be the one to select people to go on training? What criteria will be used? Next thing, you go straight back to favoritism, nepotism, and then you send people there who are not capable of coming back and performing in the manner that was intended. What are your views on that?
Yeah, we had that previously. I remember sometimes they used to say, blend this thing ethnically, ethnic blending as the case
No,
may
no,
be.
they used to say. Yeah, I think let me correct you. The president then used to say he needs optic. I think that is what Larry Lewis. That is what Larry Lewis came back and told us. I remember when Mr. Felix and other officers, Mr. Wills, Mr. Trim, Jamir, myself, Mirai, when we were identified to go to England for that training to succeed Mr. McDonald. Of course, Mirai and I were struck off at some stage, and there's another story in itself.
Uh,
Mr. Larry Lewis, the commissioner, came to us, and when we questioned the involvement of certain people, he said that the president told him that he need the optics.
uh,
In other words, when you are selecting, don't then select based on qualification, don't then select based on competence. You have to have some type of optics, and we interpreted that to mean you must have some ethnic balance or ethnic involvement in the thing. So you can't send just one ethnic group, even though they might be the most qualified. You have to look at how it appeared and send some people from the other ethnic group who may not have the necessary qualification, but he wanted the optics. So I have to interrupt you to make that point very clear.
uh, and that is when they would resurrect Dr. Peter. Peter principle will come into play, that you promote a lot of incompetence because you send them there and they're not ready for the job, and they come back and you have no real benefits from out of the training. But I think one time we had corrected that thing a bit, because remember we had what we call a border training,
Correct, correct.
and we had members of the border training from the University of Guyana, plus persons who were had experience in adult learning, like Mr. Samuel Small, Mr. Pryor Jonas, and others. And before we send anybody on a overseas training program, they have to appear in front of the board, and the board have to be satisfied, like, look, this is the right man for the training, and that person would be sent as the case may be. And when he comes back, make presentation and try to put some of the things that they learn into practice. So there's no board of training now. There was an oversight body. So there's no oversight body. Well, if you ain't doing any kind of training, there's no need for any board too.
Exactly.
There's another story.
But in addition to when those programs were put together, you had the input of people like you remember you refer to. I used to call you Uncle Sammy.
Yeah.
Uncle Sammy Small from adult education. You
Yeah.
had Dr. Mark Cotton was integrally involved in putting together police programs. You
Dr.
had
Scott.
you had Dr. Scott. I remember the guy who taught us English. You remember him very well. So we had
Henry Milton Shakespeare Wharton, HMS Wharton.
yes, Mr. Wharton, and all those persons would have an input in the compilation of the programs and so on. So those programs were not just only police officers putting them together, because we recognize that many of the subjects that needed to be taught were outside perhaps the competence of the members of the force. So we went outside to get competent, capable, professional people to be integrally involved in putting together the program, and not only putting together the program, but delivering the program. For example, you mentioned, alluded to earlier, the prosecutor's course that was held. That course had the involvement of the DPP's chamber. It had involvement of the University of Guyana Law Faculty. And therefore, it was a program that was well put together, well structured, and when it came to the selection of the candidates, that too was a very involved process. It wasn't a willy-nilly thing.
That's true. And you couldn't do a program unless you had clearance from the board of training. The board of training had to. And those were experts in adult learning, because adults learn differently from children. And they talk about pedagogy and andragogy. And it's how you treat adults. That's when the learning will take place. So important also, since you mentioned about training, Paul, is that we not only policing subject, that the police must be able to develop people's skill. We want them to form community policing group. We want them to do station management committee. We want them to do youth club. We want them to associate with members. Yes, last time you mentioned about community-oriented policing and problem solving. We want them to get involved, but you have to develop people's skills, things like communication, anger management, effectively dealing with people, policing multicultural and diverse society, self-esteem, and those kind of things that you have to inculcate people's skill in the police, because it's not only about locking up people, it's terms of dealing with people. The strategic management talk about partnerships. If you're going to deal partnerships, you have to give the police the skills to deal with people, because it's people you're dealing, and it's people that's got to make the thing work.
Thank you. We mentioned names, Mr. Small, Mr. Cotton, and these people, and someone in the person comment, and you also mentioned about the wide scope of the training. Somebody reminded me, thanks to that reminder, that we had Mr. Dwyer who taught etiquette, because it was very important, right? You had, and thanks to that reminder, viewer, you had Mr. Orby Dwyer who came to us and taught etiquette. And people say, well, what that had to do with policing? But it had to do with the individual is making sure that the person was comfortable when he was in certain company. And because remember, especially when you go abroad and even locally, you are representing the force, and people look to see how you act, to see how sociable you are. So yes, we had all of that type of training. Now we died teaching you how to use your cutleries and your crockeries, how to store your coffee. I always remember that when he taught us how to store, and those things are necessary, very important social skills. Yeah. So, any closing remarks?
Let me just add in a quick one. There is that I can remember years ago the police officers mess. A very senior government officials. We had a dinner, and it was roti and curry. And I gave him knife and fork to eat the roti and curry. So he put away the knife and fork and used his hands and
Yeah, like foreign objects, man. You can't give them out foreign objects to deal with. You have to you have to keep him in his comfort zone. But then again, I think we might laugh about it. But these are social skills
yeah.
that you need to have
Yes.
because you're not going to be among your perhaps your peers all the time. If you are representative of the organization, you're representative of the country abroad, you're expected to adhere to certain social etiquettes, and those things have to be taught. So yes, thank you again, viewer, for reminding us of that. Any closing thing you want to at this stage?
I just want to urge the police to get on with the job. But don't sit down and just wait for auntie to cough. Be futuristic. And there are many senior police officers. Don't worry, me and you, Paul. They don't bother with us, who are willing to assist, particularly in the area of training. And they can get them involved, but they have fractured the relationship with the former senior officers and the current members of the police force. And if I may go back to my first aid training, the fracture is not simple, it's not compound, it is complicated. And they
Yes.
need to make sure that they get back to training, treat training seriously. Last program mentioned, don't treat training as an unwanted, unmarried, pregnant stepdaughter. Get the involvement of people who know about training to do training.
Wonderful. Get the people who know about training to do training. And I would like to close by saying this, as I've said before, two things. One, to those who are listening and the powers that be, don't listen, don't bother with the messengers. Forget about the messengers. Listen to the message. And if you listen to the message, I think you're going to be able to pick up certain things that are needed. I want to close by again urging all of us to make sure that you comply with the COVID guidelines. I like to end this way to tell you, even though at this beginning I said to you that the numbers have been declining, which is a good thing, but I want to urge for us to continue to be extra careful and observe the guidelines, because declining numbers does not mean that the virus has been eradicated. The virus is very much there. And if we are to get careless, then the next thing you know, we're going to hear about some other wave. And we don't want that. So I urge all of you to continue to be vigilant, continue to follow the protocols, and let's be safe. And God's willing, I'll see you again next week, Wednesday, at 11 o'clock Guyana time, 10 o'clock New York time or Eastern Standard Time, when you have the 9th episode of Speaking Out, Exposing Corruption and Incompetence. Goodbye, and God bless.